Hey everybody, welcome back to Fire Pit TCGs. It's Hellfire, and I'm joined by Tetrus and Fatigued for video 1 of 3, going over the changes that P4 brings to Japanese Diva.
Hello.
Hello.
So for those of you who don't know, Fatigued is one of our 4 MS representatives for North America, and Petrus is also one of our judges. You guys have anything you would like to add?
Yeah, so, as Hellfire briefly mentioned, these are just going to be some, we're just going to go through some sample deck lists that we came up with to help our North American Mugen Shoujo players to get started on what to play for JP Diva, because, well, these players have pretty much played English format their entire lives playing this game, and now they're already jumping into like a new language. They're many sets ahead of us, so we're going to try to ease that little difference in time gap by doing one of these little videos, and yeah, we'll see what we can do for them, and hopefully this will be pretty helpful to these people and for you watchers as well, for understanding what these new decks can do.
So we're going to start out with this video with all of the centers that came out in 24-1. So that's Tama, Hanayo, Piruluk, Midoriko, and Urith.
Yep, that is the 5 centers from a Recollect Selector. Keep in mind that we're only going to go over the low rigs that were featured during WiXoss P1 and onward. If you have a favorite lyric from the Lost Storage era or the Diva era, like Hirana or Real and Mel, they won't be here because they were not supported in these sets. But if you like those characters more than what we have to show here, well, maybe you can get some ideas and cook something up on your own.
Absolutely. We're not saying that the older lyrics aren't playable. It's just most of what's been printed is more tailored to these lyrics going forward. So starting out with our sample Tama list here, I'll let Tetrus take over this one because this is kind of his baby.
I'm gonna call it my baby, but it is one of the decks I played the most of in 24 because shooting is really fun. The keyboard shoot is really fun. A little to my dismay though, the modern version of Tama doesn't use the shoot keyword nearly as much as it used to. It's now become pretty much a blue-white slow resource deny shell that we've seen before a ton in English Diva in many forms with Azusa, Remember, etc. But this deck kind of takes it to the new extreme by pretty much taking out every source of Signy damage possible from the main deck and just letting the win con be Tama herself alone. And that is most illustrated by the fact her level 3 is just attacks twice every turn with 1 discard and 1 enter payment. Pretty easy to accomplish most of the time, as long as the deck has good resource flow, which is what the blue package is kind of for. And to help close out games, the Tama got a pretty crazy level 4 with this OPG that just lets you threaten at least 4 or 5 damage on that one last turn, and your opponent probably won't have the enter to answer most of this or any of it at all, since, well, you've been denying them the whole game. So that's kind of the whole gist of the deck. The way this deck works, you want to trivialize as much combat as possible through the shoot keyword, which just trashes anything you vanish during combat. The best ways to do on this deck would be her partner signaling energy and her other level 3 in the light bursts, Tsunomaru. They're both your best shooters because they're 12Ks. They get bigger with their other effects, and that's your primary way of messing with your opponent through combat. But we know from those English Diva decks previously that just denying enter isn't enough to carry you through games. You gotta mess with their non-field resources too, so that'd be their hand. So that's what Tama has kind of pivoted herself into. So we're gonna look through her blue cards, mainly Fountain Show. Fountain Show is probably one of the best blue cards ever printed. Everyone hates this card. I like this card for different reasons, but
this card is fantastic, regardless, just because of how versatile it is, despite being off class.
Yeah. This card being off class doesn't really matter too much because Tama 3 only requires you to have one arm sticking on board for the double swing. You don't need a full field of them to do your thing. And
even if you did, her auto could easily replace her two autos could easily replace the fact that she's off trait.
Yes. And so the main reason why Fountain Shell is in this deck over other like discard outlets is because, well, it's an unattacked discard too, and the way she does that discard too is she bottom decks herself on that attack, so she doesn't do the damage or do any combat. So that means she doesn't actually accidentally vanish your opponent's Signy through combat. This way, she just leaves it there, and then you just have to deal with the fact that you're not getting that enter. You're just losing 2 cards in your hand instead. Yeah, tough luck, buddy. And it's also like kind of crazy that Fountain Show is like super strong defensively too, because, well, if they try to interact with her on your turn, you just get something else instead. Like you can just put down like a flam bird to just buff all your white Signy up, just because they tried to mess with you. There's Arte, the other blue Signy that just causes more discards. Because if they answer the Fountain Show, they just get half of the Fountain Show instead. Because when your other arm Signy shoot things, they also discard your opponent. Isn't that crazy? Very fun. So those are some nice targets for you to have there. And then lastly, the other blue card is also not an arm Signy, but it kind of plays into the same kind of plan that Fountain Show does, Yamato Takeru. This card doesn't read like very much, but then you have to think. Then, like looking more into it, when I was reading the card, I realized, wait, this card is just Firefly Squid without Harmony, and it also self downs, just like ignoring Harmony with Firefly Squid. So,
it is. It actually is. Oh my god.
Yeah, it has like none of the hoops and hurdles that Firefly Squid originally had. So it's just nice. It's like a nice little like upgrade from that. And also because the deck has access to plenty of blue cards, that also lets them upgrade their arts deck by quite a bit, because white arts, from what I've tested, aren't really too consistent at good defense. But now by adding Frozen Gear with the most efficient blue arts in the game for like defense, the deck has some tankiness to it now too, along with the already like oppressive boards this deck can put forth. It's a very strong deck, and the deck was lacking a good like finishing like end game win condition. Was trying to do. It was just kind of like trying to win games through attrition, and sometimes that doesn't work all the time. So Tama 4 does address that a lot pretty well by just giving your field another like 3 damage out of nowhere. It's a good deck, and it's not as like popular as the other top tiers that were in previous sets before 4th Selector, but I do expect Tama to have a strong showing moving forward.
Oh, and one thing probably should mention for all of these level 4s is whenever for most of these you can assume whatever their level 3 does still applies once you grow into their level 4, because all of them copy one specific ability from their level 3s is also treated as the same name. So even at level 4, like Tama is still threatening 2 damage a turn.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, and I forgot to mention, on top of the new level 4 that Tama got up in the new set, she also got a new pretty good Signy in the name Jigari Maru. It's a new level 2 non-burst. It naturally has shoot, which is a good start. Like we want to have that keyword all the time when we can. And she also just gets bigger whenever you're just when you're just playing the game normally. She's just a 10. She's a 5K, either be a 5K shooter, which is nice when you're going first, or a 10K wall that also shoots if you want to go the extra mile a little bit. So the card's quite versatile, and it also makes your level 2 game a bit more stable because you can now do Jiranarimaru plus Flamber, and that's like a 12k wall for the opponent's turn for them to deal with, and when you're already shooting them down with whatever nonsense you're doing. Granted, the shooting doesn't happen until like later game, but it is something worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with early shoot, especially she can trigger herself as well. So yeah, definitely very strong going first play.
Yeah, going first with a 10k and a shoot is, as seen through a lot of the times, really strong.
We did kind of see that recently in English to some degree with the most recent GP because of Hasumi.
Yeah,
Hasumi's bond, yes.
Yes, Hasumi was 12k back then, which is quite a bit stronger than the conditional 10k that Jiranemaru presents. But let's just say bonded Hasumi is one of the most overtuned cards in existence. Still kind of is.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, 12k that just has the shoot text is
and has a very strong versatile burst.
Yeah. The card is very overtuned there.
Yeah. If there was an option to like maybe play Hasumi with like a BA bond shell with like Tama, they would probably have experimented with it by now, but now with Jiranemaru you don't need to do that as much. So yeah, deck is good. It definitely got the upgrade. The main upgrade it got needed from his 4, and the new level 2 is just a nice additional flex to her deck building. Good deck.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to talk about one of 2 Hanayo decks. And I say 2 here is because the 10th anniversary book gave us a what we call a 2-stop Hanayo, where it's like your last grow is at level 2. That's it. That's actually like not that bad, and considering a lot of red arts currently have one funny line of text, like this Lurig is like the perfect example of like a super high like aggro, almost dash level. Well, a little more than levels of dash, honestly. I don't know how to compare the two realistically. But basically, because she stops at level 2, you don't have to run... You get 2 extra art spaces, because you don't have to run limit upper arts, and you don't have... well, you can still run Recollect. I don't know why I was about to say you do. And since you're not running a level 3, sorry, there we go. Since you're not running a level 3, and you don't have to run enhance arts, you have the ability to jam a lot more like main phase or attack phase, like firepower, defensive power into your Lurig deck at the cost of not having a level 3.
Yep. What you're seeing here is just a 1-to-1 list that took second place at the Autumn GP in Japan. I didn't do any changes to it. It's just a straight rip from there. Easier to talk about, and I'm not really sure what I would do with this list anyway, with the P4 changes, because that set is not targeted for this type of deck. But just because the new set didn't do anything for 2-stop Hanayo doesn't make the deck any worse. All the best qualities of the deck are still there. You have your 7 arts with the firepower, as Hellfire mentioned. All of them either do something along the lines of just do 1 damage without much cost to them, because arts are pretty efficient at that, or they just crush extra cloth, because that's always fun, or they just grab like an immediate amount of like resources to burn on the immediate turn to just keep yourself going. It's a very fast deck. The multiple forms of like big damages deck can output early is kind of crazy, and if you face this deck, it's pretty clear that their win con is at the moment that they hit 3, they can probably threaten lethal on you. So that'll be one of the challenges that these Mugen Shoujo participants will have to get used to when playing against this deck and red in particular. All the red decks we're going to talk about, they all have some way to deal multiple life cloth crushes through the rig deck alone. So those red decks are very good at racing. They're the best. They're the best at just outpacing whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, any of the red decks could easily slot in just any of these cards, especially. I believe it's this one, yeah. Especially like run through the Searing Flames. Literally just a 1 enter, deal 1 or crush 1 cloth. So against red, it's always safe to assume that you are starting at less than 7 life cloth, no matter what.
Yeah. Most of these decks tend to run like 2 or 3 of these effects, maybe even 4 if they can fit them in. Pretty spooky stuff. And there is one new art that adds another life cloth crush effect to the card pool, but that requires green enter to be paid. But I don't. I would expect the Hanayo 2-stop players and other red decks to, if they want that kind of effect in the deck, just have another crush effect on their cloth. They can easily like make the needed accommodations, right? To just add a little bit of green here and there to get that card going and make their clock even shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And then the combination of some red decks will likely run the Inner Burn, so they can blow out the opponent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Red's Inner Burn capabilities are at their best in WiXoss. They're very good at it. And even in this deck, it has like the premier Inner Burn arts, Concentrated Crimson Flames. That thing just like kind of just burns the opponent's entire inner zone if you're not careful. And there's some classic anti-defense measures in the main deck as well with Tenguzaru and Lalu Gomoria. We've seen that package in many different types of red decks in the past, and those cards have aged pretty well, I would say.
Most definitely.
Yeah, all in all, there isn't like outside of red deck. It's still something to look out for, just because if you're caught with your pants down, this deck can easily just go, all right, you're just dead. Good luck.
Mm-hmm. No, expect us to say that a lot for all these red decks. They all have one singular game plan. They just they just kind of approach it in different ways, but the end goal is the same.
I think the only deck where it's going to be a little bit different than red deck is going to be Chiori when we get to that in video 3. But just because she has a lot more lines of play because of her magic box mechanic.
Yep.
I'm thinking of Aya for some reason. Because of her magic box mechanic, she has a lot more different lines than just Unga Bunga straight to face.
She'll still do that. She just looks fancy at doing it.
Yep.
But yeah, that's it for Hanayo 2 stuff. We did say there were 2 Hanayo decks to look at, so we're gonna move to the next one real quick here.
So the other Hanayo deck that we have is using her full rig line and more so focusing on what her class is. Where Tama we had armed, Hanayo we have. I know I'm going to say this wrong probably. I got a 50-50 shot. It's gems, right? Or jewels.
That's gems or jewels, yes. Either one works. But in English, it's jewel.
Yeah, English is jewels.
Yeah, this is the more, I guess, intended quote-unquote way to play Hanayo, even though they're both valid strategies for they're both people equal, of course. But this version of Hanayo goes a bit more definitely good chunks, not good chunks slower, but like notably slower than the 2-step version. But instead, it has a much more domineering late game with more varied ways of how to approach like certain board states, and this deck, because it has access to level 3, with a much easier time answering bigger Signy or just ignoring them completely. And that's pretty easily it can be easy to see with cards like Flamethrower Commander and Drago Adjut. They're both very consistent sources of assassin to just ignore your opponent's board and just beat them up. And they can make that board even more redundant with the access of Alexandrite. It's a little expensive and situational, but she can, whatever assassin you got from one place, she will also get. So, and same goes for like Double Crush and all that. Gems are decently flexible at their ways of dealing damage. It's just, they'll just be a bit slower at doing it than the average red deck, but instead of her being all in fast and all that, she makes up for it in her instant resource gain in her level 3 and 4. Both of them have ways of just generating a ton of instant card advantage just from their once their game abilities and their enter. So she's very, very hard to resource deny because she draws to like basically a full hand when during those later game levels. So you can try to pace your defense a bit more against this deck, but it'll be a tricky matchup for sure because she can also play the mid-range game with you because of her level 3 and 4.
Speaking of her level 4 here, it does kind of it's basically almost a way of saying that she almost kind of plays like her 2-stop to some degree. Because a lot of these level 4s, they do have to replace the slot of an art. You can look at what the level 4 does, and when you're trying to figure out what art to cut from it, if you have an art that's like 1-for-1, the Larig's like once per game or enter effect, you just do that. So we see here like she just has a once per game. All right, cool. Crush a Cloth. And the resource gain that he was mentioning definitely comes from the OPG here, but also the aggro that she offers to just turning off guards, just like her level 2 does as well. Except her level 2 is like limited to a once per game though.
Yes. And she has 2 turns of this instant resource gain. Her OPG from her level 3 and her enter exceed 4 from her level 4 as well. They're basically the same effect, kind of. So you can almost never count Hanayo out when she's behind on hand resources because she'll just get them right back.
Yep. She can just dump her hand 1 turn prior to generate a lot of enter and then just get her hand back the following turn.
Yep. And this level 4's ability to just crush a cloth with her OPG, well, that just means, she'll just be able to be on pace with all the other red decks if it comes down to a race. She has her crush effect under 4. She still has Severing Flames for another crush. And she also has, of course, the strongest the strongest and most popular red arts in the game, Flowers Under the Crescent Moon. That also just crushes 1 and also denies burst. How fun.
Yep.
Yeah, so expect a lot of these red decks to run pretty similar tools in the low rig deck because they all just want to destroy your cloth as fast as possible. And that's just Hanayo. It's just that this deck's a bit more mid-range than the other red contendants.
Yep.
Yeah, most definitely. And also another thing to note with the 4, if you crush fast enough, you can also deny a defensive arts if they're not left with many options for your opponent.
Yeah, the threat of the 4 also encourages your opponent to burn through their Lurig deck faster, which in very, very funny scenarios, if they burn it too fast, they might risk losing their level 4. Because it makes them trash any card from the Lurig deck, not just arts.
That is true. Oh, oh, that's.
Granted, I highly doubt it'll ever happen, but
I would love just to see that happen, just because I think it would be. I think it would be comedy. It's like, oh man, I have 1 card in my link deck. It's my 4, Hanayo 4, OPG. Yep, see ya, nerd. You don't get to play your 4.
toxic. So to prevent that snare from happening, you better be able to make sure you don't go down to 0 cloth too fast. And yeah, she's a bully of the rig, all right. She's had a consistently strong showing in JP Diva, and I don't expect that to change with this 4.
Realistically, though, with her once per game, I expect it if it does come down to, like, you don't burn the raid deck fast enough, I think at most will probably just pull the Recollect arts out of the deck.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's assuming, like, the opponent goes down to just the Recollect arts in the deck, but if anything, like, it could also speed up the Recollect count, too, so it might not matter. Who knows?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These are all precursory, like, thoughts anyways, because the set, as of recording, the set releases at the end of the week. So...
Yeah, we went a little ahead and did what we could for these new centers. So,
which, speaking of new, moving on to the Piruluk center. Piruluk probably is Piruluk has been my favorite so far to play in 24, and I'm glad that this variant was the one that we decided on for the deck to showcase for Piruluk, because it's the variant that I like the most. It's Shoot Piru, or I like to call it Shoot Piru, even though it's just because of like one interaction at level 3 mostly. But we do have the options for like indirect, like Larig level shoot at level 1. So the whole thing with Piruluk, she's a spell slinger deck. Her level 4 probably has the strongest enter in the entire game, just because when you consider the amount of toolboxing that she can do with her spells already. She can just grab anything out, and she also still will have the auto of her level 3 to proc as well whenever you play as Igni, so you can get 2 spells out of your trash during the turn that she's played. And also, those watching, her once per game should look oddly familiar because it's just a better Dishonor Piruluk. Like, hands down, is just a better Dishonor Piruluk when you consider what most of her main deck is, because you have 2 Badly, which is just 24 4's random drain. Your partner Signy, Vacuum, will force a draw or a discard, which will also force a minus 4k. Or just the fact Trouble's a draw 3. And we also have this funny P4 spell that is a bounce level 2 discard, which now becomes a minus 4k as well. And a lot of these spells, you'll notice too, yeah, they cost maybe 2 to 3 enter, but that's kind of trivialized as well by the fact that Vacuum lets you pay out equal to, or oh my god, my English is not working right now. So once per turn, you can pay a total of electronics equal to the cost of a spell in your hand minus 1, and play that spell instead. Oh no, excuse me. You pay out electronics equal to spell cost. You can read the effect. I can't English. Oh my god, I'm so sorry.
Basically, if you're trying to play a 200 spell like Trouble, you now only need to pay out 1 electronic signaling instead. Because it's the number of electronic signaling you pay plus 1, and that's the kind of spell you can pay for free. So, as Hellfire mentioned, Piruluk got it good for P4, mainly because of her level 4 being such a blowout type of grow, since it sets up her hand for free through her enter, and she gets to, if you know what you're doing with Piruluk, which you should be able to also completely board wipe your opponent and or hand rip them down to 0 with her once per game. So that's always nice to know that the moment you hit 4, you can probably just threaten the game to be over on the spot. That'll be a consistent type of design that we'll be seeing across the better quality of these level 4s. I do have some concerns about that, but that's for a different discussion entirely. And for Piruluk, this version of Piruluk specifically, this deck doesn't race damage as much as the Reds decks do, or neither does it deny resources on the field as much as Tama does or other enter deny decks do, but she does a little mix of both, and is backed up by some of the best toolboxing in the format with their spell salvage per turn, and and that's even further boosted and then her consistency is even more further boosted by the new signet that she got from P4 Water Server. This card is a really nice quality of life boost for the deck. So now the deck can essentially unbrick itself in the early game, or actually at any point in the game, really, by just having one of these in their hand. Being able to just grab any spell from the top 5 is really good, and you may have to discard something, but like most of the time you're just gonna discard the spell you grab because, well, you can just get it back anyway with Piruluk's autos in the future. So, which filters out your deck of spells and lets you more easily draw into Signy to put on the board, and it's just nice deck fitting. It's a good card, and that's like the primary boost in the set that Piruluk got there at the 4 and that level 1. It doesn't sound like much, but like in a game as like WiXoss, where you go through your cards quite quickly, having something like having like a singular card or like one or two of in your deck to improve, you'll be able to see the improvements immensely.
Mm-hmm. And the biggest mix for the resource denial that Tetrus was talking about is an interaction between the spell update and a card that realistically hasn't seen play since it came out, funny enough, Chandelier. So, from update's text, it gives it electronics whenever it attacks, targets taking your opponent's field, and banish it unless they discard 2. If you attach any copies of update to Chandelier, that Signy will also get trashed, because Chandelier's constant of needing a spell in trash to banish sends to trash instead of the ender zone. She doesn't care how she vanishes. She just cares to vanish. So Chandelier can become a one-man board trap with enough copies of update stacked to her. So she's a lot more threatening because of update as a whole than what she used to be in the past.
Chandelier is also consistently 13k. It'll be able to shoot through most things in the game just by that alone, and the 13k body is kind of hard. It's just a nice wall to have. This deck is on the slower side of things, but the fact that Chandelier is like just above the average power threshold for 3s makes it very annoying for most removal to try and address properly. And this slow style has gotten to be pretty popular as of late. There's another build-up period which uses more red cards and deal more damage, but that deck has some more deck building choices that we need to test further. But the blue-white build with Chandelier and a ton of other white cards is a lot more straightforward to approach and understand. So this is probably a much more easier place to start for Piruluk testing. The deck is it's not as fast as Akira, but hopefully with the new P4 changes, she'll be a good contender along with Akira, the best blue, which is still probably the best blue rig among this format.
So moving on from Piruluk into Midoriko, a lot of these cards, from what I know from 24 era Midoriko, is there's only one thing that she suffers, and it's that a lot of her newer card pool is almost useless, because her best card pool comes from everything pre-arts format.
This is kind of like a consequence of how well and tightly designed Terror Beasts were historically in Diva. Of all the rigs that were featured in WiXoss, Mido was the one that needed the least amount of help, mainly because Signy like Thoroughbred and Tenguzaru are as strong as they are. And even Hamster has aged pretty well as well. That card is really nice. But the problem is, those are all red cards. Midoriko isn't red. So instead, we got to look at how the green parts of Terra Beast support it, and this is what they come up with. They kind of split up the Terra Beast into like 2 individual roles and how they operate. You have the buff, the thingy that just solely buff the powers of your field. So that would be Bayar and Grease Turtle. Those are your main ways to make your Signy numbers go high here and reach the needed thresholds to get their effects. Like Tengu needs Tengu needs 12k for effects, 12k and 15k. Hamster needs 8k, etc. And then you have then those were the payoff Signy, right? Tengu and Hamster and Meow and all these others. So that's how the deck kind of like splits the class into its individual roles. It does sound a little inconsistent at first, and it kind of is, but the biggest strength of Mido is the fact that Signy's numbers are so insanely large, and has the most easy access to damage keywords among most of the race in the format. Lancer and On Attack Vanish are as strong as ever, and they're incredibly easy to access because Terra Beast love Lancer, and Midoriko just gives something On Attack Vanish just by itself at no cost. There is a very efficient deck. It's the most aggressive green deck in the format, and because of how easily it can enable Tengu Zaru's anti-down utility, and the fact that all the Signys are so large, I can expect a lot of matchups to just be like, oh, Mido just has this certain tool that just works perfectly against the opponent. Well, I guess that's a free win, right? Kind of like Tengu Zaru against Monica Clap back in the day, or Monica Dub even, because they're both down and Tengu Zaru cannot be downed. So if you're facing, Midoriko does have that privilege of being able to just field a ton of Tengu Zarus with Lancers or on attack damage or whatever, like tons of lethal, and your blue opponent can't do anything about it because they all have down defenses.
And this does work for bursts as well. So Tengu Zaru is like just incredibly resilient against any blue in general, to where you could safely leave her in a open lane and know that damage is guaranteed because the opponent cannot do anything about it.
Yes, this also plays into Midoriko 4's OPG, which even adds even more life burst resilience to her boards. It's one of the weaker 4s in the pool at a glance, but this OPG that gives the board buff and the cross turn shadow is just relevant enough that the only way for your opponent to defend themselves against these particular board states is if they have that exact hearts they save properly to defend against Mido OPG, and like their board of like 20 something Ks to dodge most of your life bursts.
So to keep in mind, the average power level that you'll see at level 3 onwards is 10 to 12k. There isn't like anything 13k plus that I can think of across all the decks that we're going to talk about. We've got 16 decks total, so I might be forgetting something. There's literally like one line of play that Midoriko can do with her OPG, and that's why Tetra says it's like, unless they have like the one specific arts that could potentially stop this, which would just effectively be just like target something and just can't attack, is about the only thing that can stop half of these. Because a play of just one Thoroughbred with literally just playing one Thoroughbred to the field with any other 10Ks is immediately like 20k, and immediately like just puts your board to 20k just alone there. Well, sorry, you need a full board of 12ks for just one Thoroughbred to completely make your board like life burst proof because of the shadow.
Yes.
The only thing that does get around it too is spells, but that's like only 4 decks that use spells.
And the decks that do use spells tend to have spells that have down effects anyway, like Trouble and Random Drain and Two Bad is a different thing, but Random Drain and Trouble.
And Tenkuzaru dodges all of that.
Yeah,
And
because of how badly Tenguzaru checks blue defenses and like blue decks in general, I would not be surprised if the people attending Mugen Shoujo decide to just not play blue because of how scary Tenguzaru is.
Because by comparison, going from an English standpoint, with the exception of Vegas GP2, where Midoriko had like kind of a strong showing, mostly like I would attribute that to like just Desona in general. Other than that, like Midoriko's been like super strong P in WX24 era.
Yep, very consistent deck, just not super popular because Midoriko herself is not that popular. But that's perfectly fine. But that doesn't mean you can't disrespect this deck because it does have the best anti-defense measures out of anyone in this format because of Tenguzaru, because of the new level 4's OPG. It can get around most defenses pretty effortlessly if your deck is not prepped properly for it. It's a very good deck.
That and the consistent damage from all the Lancer and the on-attack Vanish is very aggressive, similarly to like a red deck we mentioned.
Yeah, Lancer gets around a lot of keywords, like Shadow, primarily, and that's like kind of huge against a handful of matchups that use that keyword often. But also Lancer is just a fancy way of saying, oh, I'm threatening damage, but I'm still keeping your stuff on board, so I don't give you the enter ahead of time. So there's a decent amount of enter control that Midoriko has access to as well. Not because of all the consistent access to Lancer on attack Vanish, and also the Meter 3 OPG just like burning. That's just like blocking out a number of enter just because it can. Midoriko's has always had like a side identity of her being able to do enter burn, and so this is just a continuation of that. But yeah, I guess this is just a precursor of me saying, unlike past Diva history, green and blue are probably the two best colors in this format. We're going to be talking a lot more about those two colors than the others for sure.
I mean, blue's always been a strong color in Diva format, at least English side of the game. How often has blue been in the top deck? Though the top deck, if not the top deck.
Yeah. As a support color, blue has always been strong, just not like as a main color, like center of the rig main color. That's a little less consistent, but now it's at its peak form.
Right. So
speaking of a color that's not in peak form.
I'm
in shambles. I'm in shambles.
Don't worry, we'll be nice to her in the next video, Fatigue, but for now we need to bully this one.
It'd be like that.
Anyways, to round out our selection for P1 and the funny color that we mentioned earlier, we have Urith. Now, unfortunately, unlike current English history, where black has been like a really strong color as a support color, similar to blue, standalone feels a lot, I guess, worse. Yeah, a lot. I don't even know why I'm saying I guess. It feels a lot worse in P4 era.
It's very lackluster.
Black is in its worst spot ever in WiXoss history in 24, and I don't expect that to change at all after P4. They do not like this color for some reason, and Urith is one of the worst receivers of this type of misbalancing. Not only has Urith not gotten a top on WiXoss box since July 2024, she also received probably the worst level 4 out of all of them in the format. This 4 really doesn't do anything. She has a very good enter exceed that salvages 2 anything. That's a great start, right? But then you read the OPG and you realize, wait, after you think about it for a little bit, and you realize that, wait a second. All this text is like really scary until the fact that your opponent gets to choose whatever mode they want on it to resolve it. 99% of the time, they're just gonna discard their whole hand. 99% of the time.
Especially with blue decks. Oh
yes.
man.
Yes, and because, or they could even decide to just trash their own field instead. If they decide, Urith has not done very much to me board state wise throughout this whole game. I have a ton of Enter because Black just does nothing but banish my stuff all the time. I have a ton of Enter. I have a good amount of hand for the Servant that I just need to discard. I'll just trash the board, save them the trouble, and I'll stop them with my Arts instead. This once per game is not good, but it still offers an amount of value that main phase Arts usually would not be able to accomplish by itself, and because of that, it's still pretty much worth running as like getting two cards back from your trash and messing with some part of your opponent's late game state, even though it's the one part of their board state that they care about the least. The main deck though has some decent tools behind it. Because Demon is such a shared class in the card pool, it's shared by two other little rigs, Alpha and Ruko. Ruko has white demons, Alpha has more black demons to add to Urith's own black demons. She does technically have the largest card pool in MS2024, but that doesn't really mean anything if most of the cards in those card pool don't really accomplish that much. Like, the color is so tragic that Urith is like one of the only of the rigs that isn't running 4 copies of their partner Signy because of how clunky and unwieldy it is compared to everyone else's partner. It's kind of a tragedy. But but let's not talk too much down on Urith herself, on the state of Black. We still need to talk about how the deck works.
Before we do go past that point, there was one thing I did want to mention about her OPG. You can choose to do in this. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I just remember this conversation from when this card got spoiled. You can absolutely pick a node that you have 0 cards in, and the OPG still does nothing.
Yes, that is correct.
So if you have no enter, you can choose, or if you have no board, you can choose to just trash your entire board. If you have no cards in hand, you can just choose to discard your entire hand. Like, it's that's like the only unfortunate downside to it, is if they literally just added the line of text,
like one or more. Yeah.
Like, it has to be like one or more. If they have one or more cards in hand, kind of thing. Or one or more cards in their enter zone. If they literally just added those 2 lines of text, it would be so much better of an OPG.
Yeah. But granted, Urith isn't really good at doing resource control to begin with, so they're gonna lose something anyway.
Yeah. That is fair, but it is still one of those nuances of an OPG that it's just like, oh, somehow you ended up in this situation.
Yeah. Alright, so a little rundown of how Urith works. She's similar to, I guess, if you played Magic the Gathering before, she's like the Aristocrats type of deck, where she plays a ton of like little fodder little Signy, and then she sends them to the trash through other card effects to enable other effects. The primary one that she'll be using for her fodder Signy in this deck is Vasago. Vasago's a really, really old card, but it works decently well enough in this deck because it does provide an early body for the early game levels. It is green to let her play arts that are better than Black, with and enter charges. So it does provide a decent little resource boost when you send her to the trash through other effects. So that's like one of the ways to do it. Urith level 3's ability also lets you generate some advantage through her auto to replace what you trash for the effects, so you don't go completely minus some card advantage when you try to operate this deck. And and the idea of this deck is to, well, long run, out-resource your opponent, out-toolbox your opponent, and because of your surplus and resources, you want to be able to just outvalue them and just be able to like still keep going when your opponent has like attrition themselves out. Basically, doesn't really work that well in practice because this deck is a little bit too slow, and it works a little bit too hard to make it to generate its damage. Like even her partner sitting on a Mirage literally doesn't work unless you have a full field fire hand. Like what even is this? And her removal is opponent's choice. So you see that like giant signet the opponent has on on the other side. They're probably like playing white or something, and they have like a 15k of like Remember Memoria. Well, they're not. They're just gonna keep that signet there, and you have to deal with it yourself. So if you don't sequence your removal properly, and that's kind of the thing with Urith in general. She's giving all these like really important effects to the opponent for them to decide how to handle, and why the heck did they do that? But aside from that, it is still a pretty basic blackjack, and past that, it has the minusing, it has the milling to do the refresh, but the amount of minusing this deck does is honestly worse than Piruluk's minusing, or blue minusing in general, which doesn't really make any sense, but that is the current state of things for black. And because of that, the deck has to resort to other colors of demons to try and like get them together, with green demons and white demons from Ruko with Sakyu, Arion, and such. It's Urith's not in a good place. And P4 did 0 favors for her. I freaking Takara totally hates the rig.
Yeah, definitely is saying something when you have to call upon other colors when you have, Bang Dishona in here. I mean, it does the job. It still gives it a very important decision to your opponent, though.
Yeah, it's on theme.
Yeah.
When your opponent gets to choose what you want to choose, but why?
Mm-hmm. Just take solace in the fact that Black has some of the best support arts in the format, and by best support arts, I just mean like 1 or 2.
Dark Miasma.
Yeah, but when the other colors use Dark Miasma better than the main color does, we got a problem.
Yep.
But that's enough. Of dunking on Urith. We have all the other videos to dunk on all the other Black rigs. So
yeah,
if you want more of that content, well, look forward to it in the other videos.
Yep. Again, this is only part 1 of a 3-part series. Just try and break it up a little bit.
Yeah. Let us know if you have any disagreements on our little analysis. Did we bully Black too much? Did we Did we gas up blue and green too much? Just let us know. Put in the comments, and then we like to hear what you think.
Most definitely, especially as an MS player, I would like to hear what other thoughts as well.
Yes, since Fatigued himself is competing in Mugen Shoujo, the worlds basically. Whatever you say in the comments might just influence him to try some new stuff out, or like maybe influence his deck choice for the big day.
And not even just Fatigued. It could be stuff for all of our MS participants too.
Yeah.
We really want to see our guys take gold in Japan.
Well, of course, this is the first showing of these outside of Japan players take part in this event, so we want to not be completely embarrassed when we get over there. So,
yep.
Yeah, that'll be it for this. That'll be this for this video for Recollect Selector rigs. Next up, we'll go to P2.
Lost Selector, my favorite. I love Lost Selector.
Yeah, the Lost Selector, the set that broke all Diva.
Yep.
But check out the next video to know what we mean by that.
Yep. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And again, let us know in the comments if there's anything that you disagree, and we will see you all in the next one.